So what if the real secret to success, the stuff beyond just raw talent or grinding away, what if it wasn't really a secret at all?
What if it was like hidden in plain sight? Maybe mentioned hundreds of times in a classic book, but never explicitly spelled out.
Exactly. That's the hook for our deep dive today. We're digging into Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich.
Specifically, we're using a public domain version from 1937. It's the one with the famous 13 Steps to Riches.
Yeah, and Hill makes this pretty bold claim, right, that it's the shortest dependable philosophy of individual achievement ever presented. Quite a statement.
It really is. So our mission here is to, well, unpack that. Find those key nuggets from this honestly timeless work.
Try and pin down that secret formula he talks about. And maybe more importantly, see how these ideas from way back then might actually help you today.
Whether you're looking for riches and, money, or maybe something more like spiritual growth or just mental clarity.
Right. So let's jump in. Where does Hill say it all starts?
It all kicks off with desire, but not just any desire. He calls it burning desire.
Burning desire. Okay, so like intense.
Super intense. He basically says weak wishes get you weak results. If you really want success, any kind of success, you need this definite, almost obsessive desire. It's the starting point.
Gotcha. That's the spark. Could you give an example?
Oh, yeah, a great one right at the beginning. Edwin C. Barnes and Thomas Edison.
Ah, the Edison story. So Barnes wanted to be Edison's business partner,
Yeah.
right? Not just like work for him.
Exactly. A very specific goal. And talk about challenges.
Seriously. He didn't know Edison personally. He was broke.
Ah.
Couldn't even afford the train fare to get to Edison's lab.
Most people would just given up right there. Said, oh, well, wasn't meant to be.
But Barnes didn't. His desire was so strong he actually, hopped a freight train?
Yep, blind baggage, they called it, just to get there. And Edison apparently said Barnes looked like an ordinary tramp when he showed up.
But there was something else, wasn't there? Something Edison saw.
Yeah, in his eyes. Edison saw this look of pure determination. Like Barnes was ready to bet everything, his whole future, on this one shot.
And he was okay starting at the bottom, doing menial stuff.
Totally fine with it, as long as it was any step towards that partnership goal.
So the key wasn't just showing up then.
No, Hill emphasizes it was choosing that definite goal, throwing all his energy behind it, and this is crucial, burning all bridges behind him.
Meaning no backup plan, no easy way out.
Right. It was win or perish, sink or swim. That dominating obsession, as Hill calls it, is what eventually got him the partnership. It's a huge lesson in commitment, really.
Okay, so that burning desire gets you started. But what happens when you hit roadblocks? Because you will hit roadblocks.
Absolutely, and that's where Hill brings in the next critical piece, persistence.
Ah, persistence. Sticking with it.
Exactly. He calls it the quality that turns temporary defeat into victory. And he points out, kind of sadly, that most people quit just before they make it.
The finish line is in sight, and they just stop.
Yeah. But the good news, Hill says, is that persistence isn't something you're just born with or without. You can actually cultivate it.
Okay, how? Got another story.
Yep, the classic R.U. Darby gold mine story.
Oh, the 3 feet from gold guy.
That's the one. He and his uncle were digging, hit this streak of different ore, got some advice to quit, and they did.
And the person who bought their equipment
Hired an engineer, took another look, and found the main gold vein literally 3 feet from where Darby stopped digging.
ouch, that's gotta sting.
You bet. But Darby learned from it. He apparently made a fortune later selling life insurance, and he always told himself,
I stopped 3 feet from gold, but I'll never stop just because someone says no to buying insurance. Something like that.
pretty much exactly that. He turned that failure into fuel for incredible persistence in his sales career. Sold over $1 million worth annually, which is huge back then.
Wow. So failure can actually teach persistence.
It definitely can. Darby also apparently learned about sheer willpower from watching a kid, a young black child actually, who just refused to move from a doorway despite Darby's uncle yelling at him. Just wouldn't budge.
Showing that irresistible force of will.
Yeah, even in a seemingly small situation. Persistence isn't always about huge projects. Sometimes it's just that unwavering stance.
Makes you think of Henry Ford too, right? With the V8 engine.
Oh, absolutely. His engineers kept saying, it's impossible, can't cast it in one block.
And Ford just said,
Keep trying, stay on it until you succeed. I don't care how long it takes. He just wouldn't take impossible for an answer.
he apparently told them, I want it and I'll have it. Just sheer determination.
And eventually, after like a year or more of failure, they figured it out. Ford's determination just ground down the problem.
And Edison, of course. The 10,000 attempts with the light bulb.
The classic example. He didn't see them as failures, right? Just temporary defeats, steps on the path.
You see this pattern again and again. W.C. Fields, losing everything in the Depression in his 60s.
Yeah, injured his neck, offered to work for free, but his persistence brought him back.
Or Eddie Cantor, same thing, wiped out in the 29 crash.
But he persisted, used his courage, and rebuilt his career to earning, what, 10 grand a week?
Oh, yeah.
Phenomenal resilience.
And Fannie Hurst, the writer, struggled for years.
4 years. Then suddenly publishers were chasing her. Persistence paid off big time.
So, okay, persistence is crucial. How do we, build it if it's not innate?
Hill breaks it down. He says it's a state of mind. It's built on a few things. Having that definite purpose we talked about, the burning desire.
Self-reliance, having solid plans.
Right. Accurate knowledge, cooperation with others, willpower, and making it a habit. That's key. Repetition.
He even says you can cure fear, which he calls the worst enemy, by forcing yourself to do courageous things repeatedly.
Yeah, build courage like a muscle through habit. Action overcomes fear.
Which kind of leads us nicely into the next big idea, doesn't it? Belief, faith.
Right. Absolutely. Hill calls faith the eternal elixir, the thing that gives life and power to your thoughts.
He says it's the starting point for getting rich in any sense, and it's the only antidote to failure. That's a strong claim.
Very strong. And here's the kicker. He says faith isn't just something you have or don't have. It can be induced through autosuggestion.
Autosuggestion, meaning like affirmations, telling yourself things.
Basically, yeah. What you repeat to yourself over and over with feeling, whether it feels true at first or not, eventually sinks in. You start to believe it.
And thoughts mixed with emotion become magnetic. Is that the idea?
That's his term. They attract more of the same. Focus on lack, you attract lack. Focus on abundance with feeling, and you start drawing that in.
He shares a really personal story about this, doesn't he? With his son.
Yeah, a very powerful one. His son was born without natural hearing, essentially deaf. Doctors gave no hope.
But Hill refused to accept that diagnosis as final.
Completely refused. He spent years planting the desire to hear and speak in his son's mind, constantly reinforcing it with his own absolute faith that it was possible.
Persistent, continuous effort filled with faith.
And amazingly, the boy started to develop some hearing. Then more, he came to believe it himself.
And then there was that hunch, leading him to work with a hearing aid company.
Right. He ended up turning what everyone saw as a disability into a major asset in his life and career. Hill puts it down to mixing faith with desire, communicating it relentlessly, and the son believing.
Wow. That's profound. It's not just about big life events either, is it?
No, he gives another example of a business associate who is incredibly sick. Surgery looming, doctors pessimistic.
But the associate just whispered, "I'll be out of here in a few days."
Yeah, total conviction. And he recovered. The doctor basically said it was the patient's own sheer will to live that pulled him through, that internal belief system.
So, okay, desire is the spark. Persistence keeps it burning. Faith directs the energy. What shapes the outcome? Where do the plans come from?
That's where imagination comes in. Hill calls it the workshop of the mind.
The workshop where all plans are created. Anything man can imagine, he can create.
Exactly. And he felt his time, the 1930s, this era of rapid change, was especially ripe for developing imagination. Think how much more that applies today.
No kidding. He uses Marconi as an example, right? The wireless guy.
Yeah, Marconi dreamed of sending messages through the intangible forces of the ether without wires.
And people thought he was crazy.
Worse. His own friends apparently had him committed for examination in a psychopathic hospital because the idea seemed so nuts.
Well, now look at us. Wireless everything.
Yeah.
Radio, phones, Wi-Fi. His crazy dream is our reality.
Shows how powerful imagination can be. Hill also says that when you really harness this, your mind becomes like a receiver, tuning into ideas from the ether, he calls it, like inspiration striking.
There's also that quirky story about the enchanted kettle.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
The old doctor, the young drug clerk, the $500 investment for a kettle, a paddle, and a secret formula.
But the clerk added his own secret ingredient, which was just an idea.
Exactly. An idea born of imagination. And that idea turned the kettle into a gold mine, metaphorically speaking. Funded a college, even thrived during the Depression.
And the strong implication is that this was the start of Coca-Cola.
That's the legend, yeah. A simple idea, powered by imagination, creating massive value.
Hill also makes an interesting point about misfortune sparking imagination.
Right. He mentions writers like O. Henry, even Lincoln, Charles Dickens, arguing they found their real genius after facing huge tragedies or setbacks.
Like the hardship forced them to dig deeper, to use their imagination in ways they hadn't before.
Precisely. It's counterintuitive, isn't it? That sometimes our biggest breakthroughs come when we're pushed right to the edge. Forces creative thinking.
Okay, so you've got desire, persistence, faith, imagination, but you usually can't achieve big things alone, can you?
Definitely not. And that brings us to one of Hill's most famous concepts, the mastermind.
The mastermind. What's the core idea there?
He defines power as organized and intelligently directed knowledge. And you get that power through the mastermind principle.
Which is?
Coordination of knowledge and effort, with two or more people working in harmony towards a specific goal.
Harmony is key, and he's pretty emphatic that you need this for great success.
Absolutely unequivocal. No great fortune is accumulated without it, he says. Economically, it just makes sense. You pool resources, ideas, support.
Like a good business team or board of directors.
Exactly. But then he adds this psychic aspect.
Ah, right. The idea that when minds work together in harmony, they create something more.
Yeah, like their combined thought energy increases. He compares brains to batteries. A group of batteries in sync provides way more power than just one. It's about synergy.
And Ford comes up again here, doesn't he?
Yep. During that libel suit where they called him ignorant, he famously said he didn't need to know everything himself.
He had buttons he could push, meaning his mastermind group members.
Right. People with specialized knowledge he could tap into instantly. Hill also points out that Ford's success really accelerated after he became friends with Edison.
And then brought in Firestone, Burbank.
Yeah. Hill makes the point strongly. You take on the traits, habits, and even the power of thought of the people you associate closely with. Choose your circle wisely.
Hill even did this himself, but in a unique way, with his invisible counselors.
Huh. Yeah, that's a fascinating bit. He'd hold these imaginary council meetings at night.
With who? Like historical figures.
Yeah, Emerson, Edison, Lincoln, Napoleon, Darwin. He'd talk to them out loud, trying to absorb their best qualities.
Did he say it actually worked?
He claims they started to feel incredibly real, each with distinct personalities. He saw it as a form of autosuggestion to reshape his own character. Pretty intense visualization exercise.
Okay, shifting gears a bit. The book was written after the Great Depression. Does he talk about how the world changed, especially around work?
He does. He felt the Depression taught hard lessons, humility, tolerance, open-mindedness, and it really showed the flaw in just trying to get without giving.
That one-sided approach doesn't work long-term.
Right. So for marketing your own services, your skills, he came up with the QQS formula.
QQS, quality, quantity, and spirit.
That's it. Quality. Do your work well, always trying to get better. Quantity.
Yeah.
Give all the service you're capable of, and then some. And spirit. Do it with a good attitude, be agreeable, cooperative.
He says the spirit really affects your pay and how long you stay employed.
Huge factor, he insists. And he saw the whole employer-employee thing changing, from master-servant to more of a partnership.
A partnership between the employer, the employee, and the public.
Yeah, the public they serve. He called the public the real employer of the future. And the old go-getter attitude was being replaced by the go-giver. Focus on value creation.
So how do you apply this if you're looking for work or want to advance?
First, get crystal clear on exactly what you want to do. Maybe even invent the role based on the value you can offer.
Then pick the specific company or person you want to work with. Research them deeply.
Know their policies, their people, their challenges. Then analyze yourself. What can you bring to the table? What problems can you solve for them?
And his really radical advice was,
forget asking, have you got a job for me? Forget openings. Focus entirely on what you can give, what value you can create for them.
that's a big mental shift for most job seekers.
Huge. Then, he says, prepare a brief, not just a resume.
Like a lawyer's case brief.
Exactly. Detailed education, experience, references, photo. Apply for a specific role you've identified or created. Explain why you're the perfect fit and the value you'll bring.
And the boldest move.
Offer to work on probation, maybe a week or a month, without pay initially, just to prove your value.
Wow, that takes confidence. But it screams, I know I can deliver.
Right. Makes you stand out. And he suggests the brief itself should look professional, bound, different from the stack of resumes.
He tells a story about a mother who did this for her son during the Depression, right?
Fantastic story. Her son had a college degree but no job prospects. So she masterminded this incredibly detailed, like 50-page plan book.
Outlining his skills, but also a specific plan for what he'd do in the target job, including suggestions for the company.
Yep. She even sent him to the library and competitors to gather intel. And the result. He got the job, first interview, started as a junior exec, not entry level, and got to name his own starting salary.
Incredible. And the mom turned this into a business.
Yeah, helping others create these kinds of value-focused proposals shows the power of preparation and focusing on giving, not just getting.
Okay, so all these elements, desire, persistence, faith, imagination, masterminds, value, what pulls them all together, what makes things actually happen.
Decision. Prompt and definite decision.
Kills is really strong on this one. Indecision is the seedling of fear.
That's the quote. He says indecision leads to doubt. Doubt becomes fear. Leaders, on the other hand, decide quickly and firmly.
The world makes way for people who know where they're going.
Exactly. He uses the American Revolution as a prime example.
How so?
It started with a definite decision by a relatively small group, Hancock and Adams demanding British troops leave Boston. That took immense courage and faith.
And that decision led to the Committee of Correspondence, an early mastermind.
You could definitely see it that way. Then the decision to form the Continental Congress, and ultimately the Declaration of Independence.
56 guys signing their names, knowing it could mean their death, staking everything on that decision.
Hill argues that that collective, definite decision was the real power behind Washington's eventual military success.
And back to Ford again, his obstinacy with the Model T.
Right. Everyone told him to change it, update it. He made a definite decision to stick with it, despite the criticism.
And it made him a fortune. Hill says being decisive, even if you're sometimes wrong, is better than being wishy-washy.
Far better. Quick decisions, slow changes if needed, not the other way around.
Okay, but decisions can be hard because of fear. Let's talk about the 6 ghosts.
Ah, yes. The 6 ghosts of fear. Hill believed these were pervasive, often unrecognized forces holding people back.
We need to master them. What are they?
Number 1, fear of poverty. He called this the most destructive, rooted in economic insecurity.
Said there's no compromise between poverty and riches, a mindset thing.
Totally. Number 2, fear of criticism. This one kills initiative, makes us conform, affects who we marry, what we study, even what clothes we buy.
Number 3, fear of ill health.
Yeah.
Often linked to worrying about symptoms, hypochondria, sometimes triggered by emotional upsets too.
Number 4, fear of loss of love. He thought women felt this more, but also said men's drive to please women was a huge motivator, a complex dynamic.
Gives women power to make or break a man, he says. Interesting perspective for the time.
Indeed. Number 5, fear of old age, tied to fears of poverty, losing health, losing independence.
And finally, number 6, fear of death, which he called kind of useless to worry about, but acknowledged its power.
So those are the 6 big ones: poverty, criticism, ill health, loss of love, old age, death.
And the antidote to all of them.
Back to decision, making prompt, firm decisions. When you decide, you stop worrying.
Decide not to fear criticism. Decide to accept aging gracefully. Decide to manage without something if you have to.
Exactly. That decisiveness brings poise, peace of mind. You take control back from the fear.
So it's about recognizing these fears
Yeah.
and consciously using your willpower to counteract them, closing your mind to negativity.
That's the idea. Constant vigilance against those internal and external negative influences.
Okay, the last major concept is, well, it's a bit unusual, maybe even controversial today, sex transmutation.
Yeah, this one definitely reflects the era it was written in, but the core idea is about harnessing powerful energy. Hill stated that the emotion of sex is the strongest human drive.
That if you can learn to channel or transmute that energy away from purely physical expression.
And into creative effort, it can elevate you to the level of genius. He called it the secret of creative ability.
He observed that highly successful men in arts, industry, everywhere, often had strong sex natures, but had learned this art of redirection.
And often, he noted, they were motivated by the influence of a woman, channeling that energy towards achieving goals to impress or provide for her.
How did he think this worked mechanistically?
He suggested it increases the vibrations of thought, making the imagination more receptive to ideas, inspiration, that ether again, and it adds feeling to thoughts, making them more powerful for the subconscious.
He also linked it to personal magnetism, charisma.
Yeah, that highly energized people who transmute this energy are more compelling speakers, leaders, salespeople. They turn it into sales enthusiasm.
Then there's that observation about why success often comes later in life, after 40 or 50.
Right, his Why Men Seldom Succeed Before 40 section. His theory, based on analyzing thousands of people, was that younger men often dissipated this energy physically.
And only later learned to channel it more productively.
That was his hypothesis, that learning to manage and redirect this powerful life force was key to major achievements, which often came later. Again, view it through the lens of its time, but the core is about managing powerful drives.
The key being control and redirection through willpower. Not suppression, but transmutation.
Exactly. Channeling strong emotions, even negative ones, into constructive action by consciously shifting your thoughts.
So, wrapping this all up,
Hmm.
we've gone through a lot. Desire, persistence, faith, imagination, the mastermind, deciding, facing fears, channeling energy.
It's clear the secret formula isn't one single thing, is it? It's more like an alchemy, a combination of all these principles working together.
Focused desire, relentless persistence, deep belief, active imagination, organized planning and cooperation, decisive action, overcoming fear, and directing your core energies. That's a lot to juggle.
It is, and it leads to a final, pretty challenging thought from Hill that seems relevant for you, the listener.
What's that?
He flat out states that poverty consciousness will voluntarily seize the mind which is not occupied with the money consciousness.
Meaning, if you don't consciously cultivate a mindset of abundance or success, a mindset of lack will just move in automatically.
That's the implication. And conversely, that the money consciousness or success consciousness has to be deliberately created to order. It doesn't just happen.
So the final question for everyone listening is really about awareness, isn't it?
Yeah.
What thoughts are you allowing to occupy your mind day in and day out?
And how might consciously directing those thoughts, using these principles we've talked about, shape the riches, whatever that means for you, that you attract into your own life?
Definitely some serious food for thought there.
Okay.
A lot to mull over from this deep dive into a nearly century-old classic.